Hello, my name is Rick Hernandez, and I'm from Nevada County Cooperative Extension, and I am for the soils because it is the foundation of all our fruits and vegetables.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee. Joining us, my co-host, Dr. Eric Bendfeldt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability, and from the Virginia Soil Health Coalition, Mary Sketch Bryant. And Mary, we have rejoining us for a part 2 conversation this week, Mr. Daniel Austin of Green Sprig Ag in Franklin County. If you would introduce him.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So glad to have Daniel back with us. Daniel Austin is a fifth-generation farmer in Franklin County, focused on grains for human consumption, feed, seed, and just doing some great work on his farm in South Central, Southwest Virginia. So excited to keep the conversation going. And I guess to start, Daniel, I know you have a really big focus on economic viability and where that intersects with soil health and care for the land. And, would just be interested. We talk a lot about, you can't have soil health if we're not economically viable and our farmers aren't economically viable. How do you push that message out and what are some of the things that you're doing on your operation?
Sure. Thank you, Mary. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me on. So on our operation, we feel like that economics has to be our foundation. And part of that is our own instance with kind of stepping away from the family operation, if you will, and going it completely new on our own, kind of a first generation startup in a way, if you will. But then part of it is just seeing what's happening to our neighbors around us. And so where we feel like it starts is being completely aware of why we're doing what we're doing. So for instance, in our area, this is one of my favorite stories because I feel like this is a complete success. In our area, around 2010, we've seen a wholesale switch to no-till. Before that, there were some operations that were no-tilling part of the time that would maybe no-till in their rye crop, but then they would still work land in the spring, or maybe they would work land in the fall and then plant their crop in the spring. But we've seen a wholesale switch to basically 100% no-till. It's actually fairly tough in our county to find land that's been worked anymore. I would say we're 95% no-till. And I feel like what happened is the cover crop program that was popular in the 90s, if I've got all my dates and facts correct, in the 90s and in the 2000s, were paying our producers to plant cover crops to keep watersheds clean and keep phosphorus out of the watersheds. And then all of a sudden, it was just we hit a tipping point where it made economic sense for folks to use cover crops and quit tilling land. And that intersection, that tipping point is where I'm really interested in where things tip to where it just makes sense.
That's an interesting comment. And we're talking today with Daniel Austin of Green Sprig Ag in Franklin County. And Daniel, I ran across a recent article that was published by Virginia Tech about you, and it describes you as a true innovator, always willing to host test plots and try new approaches. Let's talk some about those test plots. What have you recently been testing on your operation?
Sure, Jeff. So with our, I want to say our worldview, if you will, and our ideas, which are the idea, can we get more people onto the land? Can farmers expand by adding more people? Can we get more people in farming, if you will? What we're very interested in doing is how can we add more enterprises onto the same land base? So our current drive is the idea that we are trying very, very hard to add more enterprises on the same acre through livestock. So currently what we're trying to figure out, what we're excited about in our operation, is how much livestock can we add into a row crop situation. How much more management does it take? How much more labor does it take? And then what are the extreme positives? What are the extreme negatives? And what's in the middle? That's not really a test plot, but that's where a lot of our focus is currently.
And Daniel, I think you also talk about the idea of farming well and how that is so important to soil health as well as community resilience. If you could speak to that. How do you continue to build resilience as far as the farming system as well as resilience in a community?
Thank you. I would suggest that it boils down to two words, and that's continuous improvement. And continuous improvement can be defined in a lot of ways, all of which are true. For us, it starts with economics, but then we want to make sure that, if one way to look at our ecosystem that we're part of is like a spider web, and if you tug one part of that web, one strand, every single thing else changes. So, for instance, one thing that we do in our operation is we bale all of our straw. So baling straw is the reason we bale straw is it's a very profitable enterprise, and it really helps smooth our cash flow out in our business in the dead of winter and early spring. But one extreme negative is we're removing so much residue.
Explain that. You're removing residue.
Continue baling straw. Yes, so we're baling all the straw after our grain crops. So we thrash barley, we bale all the straw. We thrash wheat, we bale all the straw.
So in essence, you're removing the organic matter from the field.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes, we are. And for our business, it's a very good enterprise. So again, we have to start kind of our list of resource concerns is economics at the top, because if we don't do economics right, then we're not here anymore. But at the same time, we have to be really careful that we don't do this big negative of removing all this organic matter and not putting something back. So we budget in when we're doing our straw budgets. We're buying poultry litter to apply on the fields. Then the second thing that we're doing is that we're following the grain, barley and wheat with grain corn. Pretty late planting, but the reason for that is that massive influx of organic matter that grain corn gives us over, say, double crop soybeans.
And Daniel, you're obviously going back to what Jeff asked about innovation and just hearing all of what you're learning and trying on your farm. And I know that you have learned over the years. I know you're very involved as a mentor across the state of Virginia, mentoring other farmers as well as conservation practitioners and service providers. Could you speak a little bit to that work that you do?
Sure. So several years ago, as this operation has continued to grow and we've added more people to helping us, we developed a mission statement for our operation. And our mission statement is fairly simple. What we want to do is we want to improve the land and each other by supporting families, creating farmers, and caring for our community. So the reason that we got involved in mentoring is that it checks every box on our mission statement. We had a tremendous amount of people that were willing to reach out and help us as we were starting on our journey as a business, that were willing to reach out and try to mentor me as we started no-tilling. We want to pay it forward and for the betterment of all.
We're talking today with Daniel Austin of Green Sprig Ag in Franklin County, Virginia, about cover cropping and soil health and the relationship between the two. And Daniel, I'd like to ask about who inspires you, or who kickstarted Daniel Austin. You mentioned in the first episode, and I would remind our listeners, you can go back and listen to that episode at forthesoil.org or on any podcast platform. But you mentioned in that first episode that you were raised on a dairy farm, but that you kind of wanted to get away from the animal agriculture and concentrate on the crops. But who inspired you to do that and to do what you do?
That's a great question. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, and so one of the a couple of mentors that really come to mind for me is that when I was kind of getting started on my own, there was a young man with Cooperative Extension. Of course, we were both younger then. He has since moved on, but Mr. Sean Duff was a great inspiration to me, and encouraged me to try to be innovative and to be willing to try new things. Vantage out of Harrisonburg, was huge the first time that we were able to go to that and realize there were other like-minded people that were thinking about different things. Mr. Chris Lawrence with the NRCS, the state cropland agronomist out of Richmond, has been a tremendous help in this journey. Mr. Ray Archuleta was able to come to the farm before he became so famous, I guess is the best way to say it. And listening to him was also very inspiring. But to really get down deep, Jeff, this is where it really started. When I was a young man and just getting started making management decisions, the decisions that I personally were making were not working. We were going backwards. We were struggling to feed the dairy herd. Our soil was obviously leaving the farm. I remember falls that we would work land in the spring and we would have a wet fall. We were using pull-type harvesting equipment and we'd have to have 2 tractors in the field slogging through the mud. And what we were doing was not working. And as I've gotten older and became more involved in different things, if we can't drive something past just ourselves, we really don't have anything. And then I seen what I was doing at that point wasn't going to be sustainable for very long at all. Even my own career, much less passing it on to future generations. That's what really started it, was that this alarming slap in the face that if we don't change, this isn't going to be farmed anymore.
And Daniel, I know you're also part of another sort of emerging organization, the Common Grain Alliance. And if you could speak how that fits into your operation and also vision for agriculture in Franklin County, but also across Virginia and across the country.
Sure. So we belong to an organization called the Common Grain Alliance, which is basically an organization that's dedicated to restoring, maybe the right word, the mid-Atlantic grain economy. And so that means not only as me as a producer of growing grains, but it also means all of us as eaters. So, farmers markets have came a long way in the last 15 years. It's fairly common to get an heirloom tomato or pasture-raised poultry or free-range eggs. But the staple foods, the flour that's going into bread is still, at this point, is still kind of a nameless, faceless white powder. And so the reason that we're part of Common Grain Alliance and the reason this organization exists is there is a lot of steps from me as a producer growing wheat. There's a lot of wheat grown in my area. There's a lot of wheat grown in the state. There's a lot of wheat eaten in the state. Is it the same thing? And so, the organization exists to educate and promote, the idea of eating local grain. But not only that, but there's so many steps from one end to the other. And so we educate each other. So me as a farmer, am thinking very differently about someone like Mr. Charlie that's milling. He's looking for a different set of quality standards than I am. I'm looking, will it yield? Will it stand up? Or will it be resistant to rust? He's looking, is the falling number high enough? Does it have a very low probability of becoming infected with a fungal disease, and therefore making low or high vomitoxin levels in the wheat. He's interested in the yield. How much is bran? How much can be sold as flour? And then the baker is interested in how the wheat performs in a loaf of bread. Does it have a good spring? Does it have a poor spring? How is it going to crust well? Is it going to bake? When it bakes, is it going to finish well? Does it smell good? And then the eater is interested. Does it taste good? And so Common Grain Alliance exists to bring all of this together.
And Daniel, talking about the economic viability and what you've said, if we're not on the land, we can't practice good practices. And what are you seeing as far as interest in the next generation or in new farmers and young farmers in doing this work and in stewarding that land?
So we have been very fortunate to be able to surround ourselves with good people. And what we're seeing is an interest across the board in all aspects of it. We see a lot of interest in folks that come to this with already, wanting to buy property, and they want to do regenerative agriculture on it. Not only in a way to maintain but improve. Say organic matter would be one metric they're following. Profitability is a metric that I follow. We don't want to maintain, we want to improve. But the main thing we're finding is that we're finding that people that want an opportunity, that have never been able to have an opportunity. And so that's what we see is an interface here. And not only that, but hopefully I work around the state with different folks is maybe that they can also become opportunities for people that want to be able to touch the land.
Once again, we're talking with Daniel Austin of Green Sprig Ag in Franklin County, and just about a minute or so left in this episode, but I wanted to remind our listeners of a resource. Daniel was talking about the Common Grain Alliance, and there's a website, commongrainalliance.org. And Daniel, I clicked on the events tab there, and I see you've got the Mid-Atlantic Grain Fair and Conference coming up this fall, October 22nd and 23rd in Washington, D.C., and it's designed not only for farmers, but for millers and bakers and brewers and distilleries and anyone involved with small grains. That's the Mid-Atlantic Grain Fair and Conference, October 22nd and 23rd in Washington, D.C. And you can learn more about that at the website, commongrainalliance.org. Daniel, it's been a real pleasure having you on a couple of episodes here of For the Soil, a Conversation. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
And Eric and Mary, we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Jeff.
For the Soil, a Conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, call your local extension office, contact your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of The Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee.